never believed that changing your address could also change what you carry inside. But that March, with the scars of the past still fresh, something in me decided it was time to try. I needed to run away, not from someone, but from myself. After my mother, Dita, strong woman, devoted spiritualist, who claimed to talk to the dead as if chatting with neighbors, things began to fall apart. The nights grew longer, the dreams more vivid. There was always this unsettling feeling that the world around me was hiding things I didn't want to see. That's how I found myself on that dirt road, cutting through the backwoods of Georgia, surrounded by tall trees that seemed to whisper to each other as they swayed in the wind. In the back seat, just a few bags, and in my chest, a silence as thick as the fog drifting through the branches. The house was the kind that feels like it has too many stories trapped in its walls, isolated, old, with peeling paint like sunburned skin. It stood at the end of a narrow trail, hidden among twisted pines and oaks where sunlight struggled to get in. When I stepped onto the porch, the wood creaking beneath my feet, a shiver ran up my spine as if the house recognized me, or worse, as if it had been waiting for me. On the first night, I slept with the window cracked open, listening to the sound of crickets and the wind brushing the leaves. I wanted to believe I was at peace, but the feeling was something else. You know, when the silence gets so deep, it starts to feel watchful. By the third night, I was woken by something I can't explain. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't a nightmare. It was a presence, okay? I got up, walked to the window and then I saw him on the other side of the fence, between the trees, tall, still, like a breathing shadow. He was staring at me. The neighbor. It lasted only a second, a blink, and he vanished into the darkness as if he had never been there at all. But deep down, I knew he had been. And the strangest part, some part of me wanted him to come back. He showed up on a cloudy afternoon when the sky seemed undecided between rain or just the threat of it. I was in the garden, digging in the damp soil, trying to cultivate some sense of normalcy. That's when I heard the rustling of dry leaves, and as I lifted my head, there he was, standing a few feet from the fence with a faint smile and eyes that looked far too dark for that time of day. "I'm your neighbor," he said in a hoarse but gentle voice. "I live right over there, between the trees." And he pointed toward a trail that disappeared into the forest, as if his house had been swallowed by the woods years ago. He was beautiful, in that almost unsettling way, you know? Tall, well-built, with chiseled features like they'd been carved by hand. But there was something off, a subtle stiffness in his movements, a glint in his eyes that, for some reason, didn't match the smile. He looked too old for that young skin. We didn't talk much. He seemed to know exactly what to say, to reveal nothing. When I asked how long he'd been living there, he said, "Long enough." And when I tried to bring up the other locals, he just said, "People come, okay, and go." After that afternoon, I started seeing him often, sometimes walking along the dirt road, always at dusk. Other times, standing at the edge of the forest, as if watching something I couldn't see. Never during the full day. Never under direct sunlight. He was kind, yes, polite, and there was something about him that pulled at my attention like a magnet. But there was also an unease, a silent warning crawling on my skin that whispered, "Stay away." And of course, I ignored it, because there's a part of us that's drawn exactly to what feels wrong. And it was through that curiosity, disguised as fascination, that I began to notice the first signs that something in those nights was deeply wrong. The first time I heard the howl, I thought it was just my imagination. It was past midnight, and the forest seemed to sigh moisture through the cracks in the house. The sound came from far off, dragged out, low, almost human. It wasn't the sharp cry of a coyote. It wasn't the screech of a fox. It was something different, ancient pain disguised as a voice. From my room, I could see the full moon cutting through the clouds like an eye watching from above. It bathed the forest in a milky, sickly light, and there was movement between the trees' shadows, darting quickly, like something was running loose out there. Something big, something heavy. The next morning, I found marks in the yard. Footprints, not from any common animal, but not quite human either. They were wide, deep, and ended abruptly, as if the creature had leaped over the nearly 2-meter-high fence. What was strange was that when I touched the soil where the prints were, it still felt warm, as if whatever had passed through was still nearby. The following nights became a ritual of unrest. Always on the edge of sleep, I'd hear the sound. First, the branches shifting. Then, something brushing against the outer walls of the house, like claws searching for a way in. One night, I woke to the desperate barking of dogs from the neighboring farmstand. By morning, I heard on the local radio that another calf had mysteriously disappeared. All of it seemed to revolve around full moon nights, and there was a sinister pattern to the dates. I started taking notes, comparing, researching, and it didn't take long for a coincidence to catch my attention. Every time the moon appeared round in the sky, my neighbor vanished. No warnings, no goodbyes. He simply disappeared for 2-3 days. No sounds from the house next door. No lights on. Nothing. And that's when, as if a part of me had awakened from an ancient trance, a question began to pound in my chest. What if he's not just hiding, ... but transforming? It was on a gray morning after a particularly restless night that I felt a strange impulse, almost a calling, to enter the forest. I hesitated, but something inside me, a primal curiosity, a need to understand what was happening, pulled me into that tangle of trees in silence. I walked along the damp trail, feeling the cold wind slip through the branches like whispers telling me go back and go on at the same time. The leaves cracked under my feet, and each step seemed to echo far too loudly in that green emptiness. And then, right there, between two crooked trees like ancient columns, I saw it. A piece of cloth, torn, soaked, hanging from a branch, as if it had been ripped off violently. I picked it up carefully. It was part of a coat, thick wool, dark wine-colored, the same coat my neighbor wore almost every time I saw him. But what caught my attention the most wasn't the fabric, ... It was the slashes, as if claws, not blades, had shredded it. I kept walking, a bit farther ahead, half hidden among roots. There was an old wooden box, the kind used to store personal belongings. It was covered in leaves and moss, but clearly placed there with care, as if someone wanted it hidden, yet still, ... accessible. Inside were time-stained papers, hand-drawn symbols, notes about moon phases, rituals, invocations, some in archaic English, others in Latin. There was also a leather-bound journal with the name A. Blackthorn engraved on the inside cover. The surname my neighbor had, curiously, never mentioned. I flipped through the pages, my heart pounding. The early entries spoke of isolation, of fleeing from the world. Then, more confusing passages began to appear. They spoke of night fury, of loss of control, of the price of lineage. The final ones were almost unreadable, written in smudged ink and shaky handwriting. But one sentence struck me like a cold whisper behind the neck. If she finds out what I am, it'll be too late to save her. I closed the diary with trembling hands. The forest, all of a sudden, seemed to be watching me. Being a spiritist was never, for me, about religion. It was a family inheritance, a sensitivity passed from mother to daughter, like a gift, or maybe a curse of hearing what the world tries to silence. Since I was little, my mother used to say, "Some hear the world of the dead, others feel what is yet to happen." Back then, I thought it was all too mystical, beautiful, but distant. But after that night in the forest, everything began to change. The visions came first, as fragments of dreams. I saw images I didn't recognize, eyes glowing in the dark, claws stained with blood, a forest in flames, and at its center, a creature on its knees, as if crying in pain or rage. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart racing, as if my soul had left my body to visit a place I didn't know yet, but somehow belonged to. As the days passed, the voices started, low, distant, almost like whispers coming from the wall. They didn't speak in English or in any language I could recognize, but I understood. It was as if the message were being pushed straight into my mind. He needs you. You are the key. Run or accept. I tried to resist. I meditated, prayed, asked for help from the higher plane. But the more I fought the revelations, the stronger they became. I started seeing shadows passing behind the mirror, lights flickering with no explanation. One day, I walked into the room, and all the candles on the altar were lit, even though they had been locked in a drawer for weeks. That's when something changed. The visions stopped feeling like threats, and started to feel like warnings. In one of them, I saw the neighbor kneeling, surrounded by wolves. He wasn't fighting them, he was leading them. And in his eyes, there was sorrow. A sorrow so deep it brought tears to my eyes, even while I slept. That's when I realized he wasn't just the danger, he was the prisoner. And somehow, my presence there was part of it all. The full moon that night looked bigger, swollen, almost pulsing. It climbed slowly into the sky, as if it carried an ancient weight, an ancestral secret. I couldn't sleep. My body ached with a restlessness that wasn't just physical. It felt like something inside me was awakening, stretching its limbs, sharpening its teeth, waiting for the right moment. That's when I heard it. First, a dry snap like a branch breaking under heavy footsteps. Then, a sound I can't quite describe, somewhere between a roar and a wail. A primal, guttural scream that tore through the forest and sank deep into my spine. I ran, grabbed the flashlight, and went. No shoes, no thinking. As if something inside me had taken control. The forest swallowed me whole, branches scratching my arms, the cold biting at my feet. But I didn't feel pain, I felt urgency. And then, in the middle of a clearing bathed in moonlight, I saw him, the neighbor, naked, covered in blood. His body marked with cuts, hands caked in dirt, eyes burning like embers. But there was something beyond pain on his face. There was fear. "Why did you come?" he whispered, trying to stand. "You shouldn't be here. They'll sense you. It's too late now." He staggered, weak, but his muscles still twitched like they wanted to tear apart. There was a restrained violence, there like the beast was still lurking just beneath the skin. I tried to approach him, reached out with a hand full of fear and tenderness, but when our fingers almost touched, he recoiled, gasping. "You haven't realized yet, have you? You didn't come to this forest by accident." What he said next froze me. "You, ... You're part of this." At the time, I didn't understand, or maybe I didn't want to. I returned home with no memory of the path. It was like the forest had spit me back out, and that night, the dream was different. It's too real. I was in the same place, but it wasn't me. It was something else. I saw myself kneeling, covered in blood that wasn't mine. My eyes, my own eyes, reflected the moon like living mirrors. I could smell flesh, taste something metallic in my mouth, and I wasn't running from the monster. I was the monster. I woke up gasping, trembling. I went to the mirror, and for a second, I swear, the reflection hesitated, as if my own face was a second too late to follow me. As I it, was deciding whether it was still human. That's when I understood. The curse wasn't his. It was ours. And maybe what the spirits had been trying to tell me all this time wasn't about him, about me.